Oh, let's talk about being relatable. Hi, I'm Gav. I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been one for over 26 years, and here's some of the stuff that I've learned along the way, especially in the open mic scene. Being relatable is always a concern for a comedian. We look at the audience and we go, how can I connect with these people? What have I got in common with them? And sometimes you're completely relatable to them. They're like you, they're the same age, they're the same demographic, and you can connect and relate to them very easily. But sometimes the audience is very different to you. Sometimes they're, from a completely different demographic, and you're trying to connect and be relatable to them. Sometimes we can overthink it and we try and be relevant. If you're an older comic and you're trying to perform to younger people, for example, sometimes you can overthink it and go, how can I be relatable and connect with these younger people from a different generation? Well, the good news is there are ways to always be relatable. When it comes to stand-up comedy, one of the key things we do is have a perspective. Sometimes our perspective is coming from within the group, and sometimes our perspective is coming from outside of the group. If you're talking about something, you can look at something from 2 points of view. You could look at it from the common point of view that everybody sees, or that the majority of people see it from, or you can look at it from an alien point of view. That is, you step outside of it and look at it in a more objective way, away from what people normally perceive. You'll see this a lot in stand-up comedy. Sometimes the comedian is very much, for want of the better word, the everyman, or the person who fits in, is representative of the group they're talking to. And so their perspectives and their angles and the way they look at things is very much in line with the people that they are talking to. Conversely, sometimes you'll see a comedian who is weird and unusual and is very different to the audience they're talking to. And so they become an alien perspective. They're from the outside of the group and they're looking in. And their perspective is very different as well. But it allows the people within that group to look at something in a new way, in a new perspective. So you're either looking at something from a familiar perspective, or you're looking at something from an unfamiliar or unusual perspective. There's no right or wrong way. It's just that those two perspectives are going to give you a very different take and a different style of humor that'll come out of that. A common example of this is when you see a comedian performing in a foreign country. For example, an American performing in Australia, an Australian performing in Ireland, an Indian comic performing in England. You'll see the comedian talk about things in that country from an outsider's point of view. And it's funny for the people in that country to see things from an outside perspective. Sometimes it's things that they're too close to or they're too familiar with to see the humour in. And it takes an outside perspective to see what's funny about it. Relatability isn't always about the subject either. Sometimes we tend to think, I'm going to have to talk about things that these people know and that these people understand. And that can be true sometimes, but you can also make people care about things that they may not already know about. So for example, if by chance you happen to have gone to space and you want to talk about going on a rocket ship and going into space, very few people have been to space, so they're not going to be able to relate to that experience. But what they can do is connect to that experience through your experience. The way that they connect through that is through the emotional connection. So the way you feel about something and the way your attitudes and your observations of something, that's where the relatability comes in. It's in that commonality. We're all humans. We all have certain reactions. We have fears and anxieties, and we have excitement and passion. So if you're talking about something that they may not know about, you can make them care about it by looking at those things in ways that they can understand. Human emotions and human reactions are common. And you can relate to people through the emotions and through their reactions. So no matter what you're talking about, if you infuse it with your passions and your excitement and your anxieties and your feelings, the audience will be able to experience that thing too, and that's where the relatability comes from. It's not a relatability necessarily about the topic, it's about the human connection. So relatability really doesn't have to be about the subject, it's often about our connection, our humanity, and our common humanity. And that's the connection, and that's the bit that's going to work. Like, follow, share, and use these tips. Hopefully they're helpful to improve your stand-up comedy.